Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Bolofsky, Community Outreach Specialist with HD Reach, and I am so excited. I am here with Anita Ayala. She is a recent graduate of occupational therapy, and so we're going to be talking about dressing with HD. And I'm excited to kind of get into the nitty gritty of this project. But Anita, could you tell a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your backstory, and what really drew you to kind of looking into dressing with HD?
So as Erica stated, I just graduated from occupational therapy school from Duke University. And for my capstone project, which is a large project in our third year before we graduate, just kind of exploring in an occupation and how to address it. And I chose to look at the occupation of dressing and its effects on our identity. And I have an aunt and uncle with Huntington's disease. So I was able to kind of look at it through their perspective and kind of understand what HD is. I also have a grandmother with dementia. So looking more at the progressive diseases that are out there and how can we maintain our identity as our body is changing. And so I decided to create this capstone project on exploring the intersection of fashion and identity for people with Huntington's disease. And I started to work with HD Reach, and I love what they're doing, helping the HD community. And I had noticed there was a lack of resources surrounding dressing and clothing for the HD community. And I wanted to bring light to that and work with them to develop some sort of tool that they can use for the HD community.
And I think, like, Anita, when you came forward with this project and this idea, I thought it was really incredible thinking about an individual's identity. I think that's something that many of us may take for granted, where we don't realize how much, or we do, and we're fearful of losing
Mhm.
that, of how
Yeah.
much clothing and how we present ourselves really affects how we function, how we do things day to day, and how we like internally feel. And so, adding in your personal perspective and adding in your personal care of like your own loved ones, I know we felt the passion on your end and was so excited to continue learning through you. Is there anything that really kind of came out of your project that either surprised you or you were like pleased with? Like, is there anything that you can speak on?
So I think going back to what you were saying, how clothing is a part of us, there are these researchers. I'm not familiar with their first name, but their last name is Adam and Galinsky. And they came up with a term called enclothed cognition, which is the meaning of clothing and the physical experience of wearing them. And so, really analyzing what enclothed cognition is and how does somebody with a progressive disorder losing the ability to kind of function throughout their daily lives and having a priority and a basic activity of daily living being dressing, how can someone wear the clothing that they've always loved to wear, and how can they continue to wear it as the disease progresses?
Well, like, do you have anything that like you were surprised by your project or anything that you learned from doing this capstone that kind of surprised you?
I think one thing that I learned was that there are adaptive clothing that are on the market that you're able to purchase
Mm,
primarily online. There's
mm.
not a lot that you can go into a store and look at and probably try on. Um, so there's clothes that are available. They are definitely going to be more expensive depending on the quality of the fabric, the material that's being used, like the magnets and such. So, clothing is going to be expensive. What I was surprised at learning was how many people within the HD community um, had not thought of clothing like in the future. And
Mm.
I think everybody is which is a good thing, is looking at the present and what's happening now, and realistically, like, that's what.
Like I'm getting the sense of like there's a lot of people living in the now and like the
Yeah,
day to day, like, well, I just need to get up. I just need to put my pants on. I need to
yeah.
put my shirt on. I need to live in today. I'm not thinking about couple weeks, couple months, 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
Hmm. And especially looking at it more from a caregiver's perspective too, and they're having these, like, caregiver burnout is a huge thing, and how can we address the client, so the individual with HD, and also the caregiver. Occupational therapy term, we call that like the client constellation. So we're looking at everybody involved, and how can we reduce the stress of everybody. Looking into the sustainability of clothing is
Mhm.
huge. And so, how can we look at it now, even though we it's very stressful now? How can we look at clothing now so that it can be beneficial later on down the road?
Mm. So even would you say like even some clothing of like better quality
Yeah,
that's considered a little bit more of a thicker material or a thinner material that can be washed multiple times.
yeah.
Um, and I know you've mentioned to me outside of this video that, just Google searching adaptable clothing is actually way more expensive
Hmm.
than if you Google certain terms.
Yeah. And so there's this professor from North Carolina State University. Her name is Dr. Kate Annette Hitchcock, and she did a webinar, or she did a seminar on her new book about dressing and clothing with a disability. And in her seminar, she talked about how clothing is more expensive when you search for adaptive clothing. So the term adaptive is innately more expensive than if you were to just search a description of the adaptive clothing.
Mm.
Yeah.
So like some descriptions, like if I were to like need kind of more of like a drawstring type pant,
Hmm.
like I would probably type in drawstring pant instead of like adaptive pant.
Yes.
When I have your list already pulled up, and you even have so this is on our webpage at www.hdreach.org that Anita has been just like incredible in providing. So we actually have this under tips and tricks on our website. But under purchasing adaptive clothing, you have some of the search terms like front fastener, elastic, adjustable, relaxed fit, loose fit, drawstring, snaps. And then you also have some brands in stores like Zappos, Nike, Amazon, Target, Tommy Hilfiger. There's Skims, Victoria's Secret. There's all kinds of brands in stores that you also have on this page. Does the person that you watch their seminar, like do you know why there's such an increase in difference of pricing between that? Like why the word adaptive just
Adaptive clothing hasn't reached
mm,
the fast fashion market yet. Um, and so it's a labeled piece of clothing. There's limited supply of it. Um, and so I think once in the future, if adaptive fashion, adaptive clothing does become more accessible, um, and it reaches fast fashion, which there are some environmental concerns related around fast fashion, but once it reaches to that point, I think prices will reduce.
mhm.
Um, but there are some additional materials that go into adaptive clothing, which does make it more expensive. In the future, when there's more research and there's more just knowledge about disability and Huntington's disease,
Mhm.
um, I definitely think that adaptive clothing will become more accessible for everyone.
Now you have a section on here about adapting your own clothes.
Hmm.
Can you
Yes.
tell, like, did you do some of these things yourself? Like, have you added a Velcro to button down shirts and jackets?
Yes. So, an easy tip to do that would be to go to your local like fabric store, such as Michael's or Joann's, and they actually sell circled like Velcro stickies that you can just place on fabric, and you can place it behind where the regular button is, and put the other other piece of Velcro behind that, and so you don't have to go out and buy a new shirt that has magnets on it. You can just use a Velcro and place it behind, and it looks the same. It doesn't look like you didn't button your shirt,
Hmm.
which is just an easy tip. I think the Velcro little circles are probably like $5. Um, so that's a very economically adaptation you can use. Adding elastic to your pants may be a little bit challenging. I did try it. But one thing you can also do, which I have on um, the PDF sheet, is you can take your clothes to a local tailor that you're familiar with, and you can ask them to adapt your clothes, which may be a cheaper option than purchasing a new pair of pants. So you can
Mm.
go to your local tailor and say, "Hey, I would like my pants to have elastic," and they can definitely add the elastic, or they can change out the fastener to a magnet one rather than a button one.
I love that because I think that's something that I've never thought about
Hmm.
for even my own loved ones, who may need some additional assistance. It's kind of like, oh, well, let me Google adaptable
Yeah,
clothing and let me just like purchase something. But that's also not always the most ideal because if your loved one is very set on what they wear, and I mean, they could be wear. I mean, I have loved ones who they cherish the clothes that they have. They've had the same shirt for 50 years. Like they cherish that shirt.
yeah,
Um, and I can see sometimes like being a very difficult change if we were to just all of a sudden start incorporating a lot of new clothing versus just seeing how we can have conversations around adapting their own clothing that they have now, with
yeah,
it just being a little bit more safer, more feasible option for them to keep their pants on, for them to be able to but still button and maintain independence as
yeah.
much as possible.
And there's this company called Open Style Lab, and they collaborate with occupational therapists, physical therapists, engineers, fashion designers. And so they have different programs on how to adapt your own clothing, and I think different classes that you're able to take. They
That's so
also
cool.
have their own pocket kit that you can purchase. So it gives you step by step instructions that you can use to add a pocket to your clothing, which is very beneficial with the HD community and having accessible pockets to place things due to all the movement that's going on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know if you don't have it already, like some people will have like I have HD cards or
Mm-hmm.
their
Yeah,
licensing, and I've also heard that sometimes it's just safer to have something like in a
yeah,
pocket up here if they were to have pockets to have something there.
yeah,
But that sounds like that might be, even having that Velcroed or being able to have it as like a zipper type
yeah, exactly.
would be a little bit easier to access and then it wouldn't fall out.
Yeah. And I was speaking to one of my interviewees who had said that he loved to wear his shirts every day, his button-down shirts every day. And if someone loves their shirts that they love to wear every
Hmm.
day, but they're missing that aspect of a pocket, this is an easy way to adapt your shirt that you love to wear every day, to add that pocket, to add the Velcro.
Well, and I'm gonna even say, like, even as a caregiver myself, found Kizix, my partner did. Now you have it on the list, so it's on that brands and stores list, but you can get all kinds of different shoes and be able to slide your foot right in.
Yeah.
Um, and not have to worry about tying the shoes or anything. There's all kinds of different styles. And some of my family members, although this could be very life changing for them and just like not having other people tie their shoes or, but still be kind of weary of change and whether the shoe would be comfortable enough or this or
Yeah.
that. We bought our own ourselves, which we ended up loving them. And so we keep buying more, but we ended up wearing our shoes and we kept saying how comfortable these shoes are, how awesome. And we're not lying, like they're awesome. But it allowed us to kind of set up a little more of like a positive tone of like, here, you're seeing them. Hey, how about you try like putting,
Yeah.
your foot in. My shoe's gonna be bigger than yours, but and slowly we've been able to get, two of the three family members kind of in on these shoes. And
Yeah.
they swear by them. But it
Yeah.
wasn't an overnight process either.
Yeah. I think accessible clothing is for everybody. Adaptive clothing is for everybody. You don't have to have a disability in order to wear adaptive clothing. And so when we change our mindset into thinking, oh, you're like the example of Kizik, um, and their shoes. I mean, I've seen people wear them that do not have a disability, and
Mhm.
they look very comfortable. They
I'm just
look
lazy. I don't want to tie my
they
shoes.
look very stylish too, and you can't even tell that they are a quote unquote adaptive shoe. And
Yeah.
so I think when we start to change our mindset on adaptive clothing being available only for people with a disability, I think there would be more awareness on adaptive clothing as a whole.
Well, that's a great point, Anita, because it's destigmatizing, it's
Yes.
normalizing,
Yeah.
and just instead of it being like because if I try to put myself in the shoes of an individual who may be symptomatic at this time,
Yes.
I would want to kind of almost delay some things and go, I don't, there may be some like hesitancy to just change and like go adaptable clothing means I'm entering this next phase where I
Exactly.
can't dress
Yeah.
myself
Yeah.
or I'm having difficulty dressing myself how I normally do. But with what you're saying is, everyday people wear these kinds of clothing. Some
Yeah.
people love to just have the buttons that are magnetic because it's easier to
Yeah.
take off and on. And you don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to have a disability. And we should be normalizing that these types of clothing designs are for everyone. Would you recommend somebody who is severely symptomatic with HD? And how would you recommend them still trying to be able to maintain independence and dress themselves? Do you have any type of recommendations that you would do from like start to finish for somebody going through that process every day who doesn't really wants the least a bit of help as possible from their caregiver or
Yeah.
their loved one?
Yeah. I think potentially the first thing to do if they do have a caregiver is to kind of have an initial conversation and say that they want to be independent with their dressing and create some strategies on how they can address the independence from the start. And there are some strategies that I have on the PDF that can be helpful, such as sitting when you're dressing, using energy conservation techniques of putting on your underwear and your pants on at the same time, instead
Mm.
of having to go up and down for both of them. Make a less visually distracting closet so that it's easy to pick out those favorable pieces of clothing. But yeah, I think having a conversation with your caregiver when you start to have those initial symptoms that are presented to help you as the disease progresses, so that when it gets to that point where your caregiver needs to provide additional assistance, they've already addressed the initial stage of the barrier of independence of dressing.
So it's
So yeah.
really important for families and their loved ones and those with HD to have these conversations earlier.
Yeah.
Is kind of what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah,
Um,
because you don't want to get to the point where you have become very symptomatic, and you're not able to have the autonomy to voice your concerns around the occupational dressing and the independence that goes along with it. You want to have those early conversations so that the seamless conversation of, okay, let's talk about the next stage of how we can promote your independence now that these symptoms have progressed.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's something that's very powerful. It kind of ties into when we're kind of just thinking of the future. Of course, we don't, want to set on the future and think of every little thing and
Yeah,
let that take up every ounce of your day. I almost feel like this conversation is kind of rare to have beforehand until
yeah.
you like need it.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's hard mentally through going along with your mental health. It's can be challenging of talking about how your body is going to be changing in the future, knowing
Mm.
that it's going to be changing in the future. I think that can just provoke a lot of emotions and be difficult for both the individual with HD and their caregiver and their family. But I do believe that having those conversations of kind of changing your mindset, embracing the challenges and viewing those as opportunities to be able to make things easier for the future.
I think it's okay to say that, this doesn't happen overnight, not all the
Yeah.
time. I know some people may be able to look at this list and go, okay, like add magnetic closures for jewelry, which I think is awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
people still want to
Mhm.
wear jewelry, want to wear different
Yeah.
things. And maybe for some families that can be done discreetly, where it's like you're adding little adaptations to their clothing. But it sounds like it's also if you're able to have these conversations earlier, like, is jewelry a very big part of your loved one's life? Is it a part of you as the HD individual? Is it important for you to wear daily jewelry?
Yeah.
Um, and knowing that little things like you can add a magnetic closure and still be able to wear the jewelry that makes you feel good inside.
Yeah.
But having those conversations kind of ahead of time of like, these are very important to me.
Yes.
But it sounds like almost everything's adaptable.
Oh, yeah, you can always find ways to make things adaptable. Having this kind of document and having this awareness for clothing and HD being placed on HD Reach's website,
Hmm.
providing kind of this resource for the HD community is amazing to start that conversation early on. Being like, hey, you can check out this document on how to support the occupation of dressing and how it may look like for the future. How can we start implementing these strategies, adaptations for our clothing now rather than later on when things become a lot more stressful?
Yeah, yeah. Because I know sometimes utilizing a tool like this PDF can open up conversations, or it can also
Yeah,
be used as a list that you just have on hand for if you need to kind of look at it for the future or know where to kind of go see it on our website. Because you also talk about embracing challenges, like viewing challenges as opportunities. You can use this by purchasing new clothing or adapt existing favorable clothing. Sometimes you need to just read it by somebody else.
yeah.
Do you find that works sometimes for you when like somebody else writes it and you're like, maybe that's a good idea, even if I thought about it before.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think we all think about embracing the challenges and persisting through setbacks, but I think when someone else says it, it may click.
Yeah, my click. Like I know for us, if you're watching this video, you don't know I have family members that are impacted by HD, but for us, we have to utilize and just seeing it within the community too. Like sometimes the spouse is not or the partner is not always the person that that individual really listens to when it comes to change or adaptations within their life. Maybe it's the random neighbor they see every couple days that it
Yeah,
has more power and just like maybe you should check these out, these shoes would do really well for you. And because I do have loved ones that I can give all the advice in the world. I can literally show them this and be like, hey, I'm in it in this
yeah,
video, and they'd be like, I'm still not listening to you. And sometimes it's utilizing those people and resources and educating those around you as well, and pulling in your support team when you're kind of taking these steps of starting to adapt clothing. So I think with this conversation, it's important to know that people can still adapt their own clothing. They can
Yeah.
still have what makes them feel comfortable, what their identity is. Like, they don't have to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe. It might take some crafting or some like going to your local tailor and kind of checking prices and seeing what that would look like, especially if that clothing is very important for that individual. And having these conversations kind of beforehand, utilizing your support team if you need to have more conversations around this, and showing this PDF flyer of these tips and tricks that you've put together so graciously. And it's a really wonderful PDF to kind of get to, here's some adaptive strategies sitting down when you're dressing. Here's some different types of styles and things that you can do, different adaptations that you can do for your clothing. Here's some things that you can look up on Google, and here's some companies that you can go through for some like more adaptive like clothing. On our website, if you actually on www.hdreach.org, you go to our caregivers site, our caregivers button, and then strategies guide for caregivers, and then you will be able to see tips for dressing. And that's where everyone will be able to find your wonderful PDF. So I'm so glad that you've made this, and I hope that with this video or with this PDF that allows for others to be able to adapt to change while also maintaining as much independence and control to change as they can.
Yes, exactly. Beautifully said.
Do you have anything else that you would like to add, or anything that you think would be beneficial for others to know?
I think one aspect that I would like to say is that clothing is a part of who we are, whether we think we are a fashionable person or not. We all feel comfortable in the clothes that we enjoy wearing, and when those clothes aren't able to be manipulated the
Mm.
way we wear them, can be very challenging mentally, and it can create lots of stress. And with HD, there's so many things that are changing, your body is transitioning with these symptoms. And so, if we can help maintain one sense of our identity through clothing, which can just help tremendously one's mental health, and also relieve some stress on both the individual with HD and the caregiver in a whole. And clothing makes people happy, and it's very enjoyable to see people enjoy their clothes and be able to do it independently. So, if we can preserve that for as long as we could, I think that would be very special for the whole client constellation.
Perfectly said. Well, thank you, Anita. And anybody watching this, if you have any questions or anything else, you can email us at info@hdreach.org. And we have Anita's contact, so we'll be able to throw any questions her way. So feel free to comment down below or send us an email, and we'll make sure to reach out to Anita for you and get you an answer. So thanks for watching, and have a great day.